So, okay, sometimes it's about then trying to explain to people why that's important, especially in an education setting. Temple Grandin, you may have heard about Temple Grandin. She is an autistic speaker. She'll speak very openly about her own experiences, and she's been highly influential in making sure that the kind of autistic world is understood and has been opened up. So visual thinking is a strength for autistic people, and that's why we need to use that, but it can also then be the first to become overwhelmed in that kind of visual auditory. So we've got to be very careful of what we're using and how often we're using it, what else is around them. So we talk about the likes of our environment really only having the kind of information presented on walls that needs to be presented on walls, so that then the channels are opened up for receiving the visual or the verbal support that is presented and is more accessible. I think the visual is helpful because even if you think about just now, once the words are out, they're gone, they're floating around somewhere, but the visual is a permanent, it's a concrete, it can be referred to, you can go back to that, so that can be very, very helpful. And sometimes it can look like young people aren't using the visuals, so you'll get sometimes staff saying, oh, they don't need them or they don't use them. I would always suggest that they absolutely are. You're just not necessarily tuning into that side glance or that look on the wall. They are using them all the time. And what we tend to find is if we take them away, might be okay for a wee while, and then cracks start to show. So you have to work with the young person, because obviously there'll be things that they are able to say that they want or they don't want, and to work with them to see how helpful that can be. But I've just tried to list some of the reasons there about why they are important for that kind of the autistic mind, and how supportive they can be. I would be very careful with prompts, those kind of prompts that create dependency, so moving away from people to the environment is more transferable. So those visuals can do that. People, you can't necessarily do that. The visuals can always be there, but Craig might not always be there, but the visuals are. So that's where then you're supporting that independence and the transferring of the skills. Thank you. This is a huge one, and it's one that I really thought I really wanted to try and get in here tonight. So I've put links on the following slide that you'll have access to kind of follow up on some of these bits that I'm going to mention. Many of our pupils have significant difficulties identifying, regulating their emotions, and much of this is impacted obviously by their autism, and therefore then their lack of identity of self as well. Autistic young people are more susceptible to the likes of trauma and anxiety due to the autism features, such as like cognitive rigidity, communication difficulty, sensory reactivity, that kind of thing. So it's really important to remember that there needs to be a strong focus on understanding what causes our pupils to experience stress and deregulation. Just as Craig touched upon with the example of the chew, okay, we might need that to help us regulate, but what is behind some of that? And that's about digging deeper rather than just a little bit of that sticky plaster approach and maintaining the now, going deeper than that, because it does have a universal impact on our young people's ability to experience a successful education placement. We would do a kind of stress reduction and wellbeing plan for our young people when they come into us, and obviously that takes a long time to really understand the needs of that young person, but it will include things like their sensory needs, environmental considerations that's very important to that young person, communication support, what relaxation looks like, physical activity and how that can support stress, what their zones of learning look like, because that is different for every young person as well. So being able to kind of draw that information together to say that when these things are happening in this way, the stress is much lower and the young person is more able to take from the educational experience. And again, that will change. So that is a kind of document that needs to be constantly reviewed. And there can be lots of people that input into that as well, such as CAMS or OT, speech and language therapy. But I think it would be a useful thing, a holistic plan to have there. And where possible, if our young people can participate and have an input into that. We want all of our young people to feel safe and secure in their environment. That's the premise of this. So we work with our young people to develop relational responsibility and emotional regulation over time. So even though we know that it's impacted and it's difficult for our young people, we still have to support them to understand what they can do and develop that toolkit of coping strategies that are meaningful to them and that help them share the school environment. So there's a bit that we need to do on making sure that we're supporting stress and well-being, and then there's, once we're getting that right and there's bits in place for that, it's then also how we work with the young person to understand what they can do within that as well. And I mean, just looking at our population, for example, they're all on a different journey with that. And yet everything that we do has to be, has to recognise that. The PACE model you might have heard about through Daniel Hughes. PACE stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity and empathy, and they're the kind of 4 cornerstones to what we would call relational practice. Environment and relationships are your biggies. If we are getting them right, our young people are in good hands and have a much better chance at having a successful school experience. So it's about developing the understanding of what's going on for the young person underneath all of that. And as I said, I've not got time to kind of go into that tonight, but I've put a link on the next slide for you.